3, 2, 1, we're live, right? Or maybe. Thank you for applauding for the kids who are doing memory verses. They're probably not in the room to hear it, but maybe mom and dad are, and they're doing a great job downstairs with the kids today. And we talk about that sometimes. Want you to always be reminded to thank those who are volunteering in that area. Sometimes we talk about the back line, which is on the back of this room, and they're doing sound and lighting and video, and we appreciate them. But I was watching out of the window while I was getting ready to come out, and I was looking out over the parking lot, and I saw one of our security people. And these are kind of unsung heroes. They don't wear badges. They don't really, well, they kind of blend in. But they're walking the halls consistently here. They're out in the parking lots making sure everything is stable there. And then we have a number of law enforcement officers every week. They're sitting among you right now. And they are certainly prepared to take care of any emergency that might come into our services. So these guys and ladies, they never really get a spotlight on them, and that's on purpose. We don't want that to happen, but I certainly do thank them. So some of them are sitting among you. If you'd give them a hand too, that'd be... And of course, when we trained them, I told them the order is pastor, women, and children in that order. Some of you today are suffering needlessly, and I want to show you why. Let's bring up 2 Corinthians 9:6. You're suffering financially very needlessly, and it's so simple to have financial change in your life, because the Bible says, remember this, whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows generously will also reap generously. I'm hoping there's someone in the room that has never seen that before, and you've never thought about that before, but you're saying right now, that's me. That's me. That's one of the that scripture is one of the reasons that Jackie and I sow generously as we know how, to the local church, because we want to reap generously. So if you're struggling in that area, you'll have the opportunity at the end of this message to respond to 2 Corinthians 9:6. You do not have to suffer financially. God's word just shows you over and over how giving generously will result in a generous blessing. It's just amazing how it works. This is the last Sunday in the Up series, and today the title is Heighten Up. My task is to make heaven simple for you and make how to get to heaven simple for you. And some of you may say, you've been there, done that, got that, have the t-shirt, but hang on, because I'm going to give you 3 things at the end that hopefully will surprise some of you when we're dealing with heaven. And even though it may not apply to you, I'm going to have you either take screenshots of them if you can see it on the screen, or jot them down, type them in, because somebody in your life will need the last 3 things that I'm going to talk about today. It is eternally vital that you get those 3 things. So my task is to just make heaven simple. God made heaven simple. If it seems complicated to you at all, it's because human beings have made it that way. We've messed it up royally. To show you how uncomplicated God wants to be for us is in 1 Corinthians 14, verse 33. It says, "For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints." If you have confusion today in any area, it's not God. God doesn't, he's not the author of confusion. And from the first day of Remade Church, we've tried really hard. We've made huge efforts to make the Bible simple. One of the things that we said often in the early days is we never want a person leaving one of our services and say, "What was that all about?" Or scratching your head wondering if the Bible really is what we say that it is. We've tried to make it as understandable as possible, because if you don't understand what the Bible says, then we've wasted your time, and we don't want to waste your time. and we don't want to waste ours. There's a lot of concepts in the Bible that are, I don't really think they're that difficult to understand. But what we've done in our humanity is we've chosen words that aren't easy. Let me give you a list of things that I came up with. These are either words in the Bible or words that describe something in the Bible. Absolution, apocalypse, atonement, cherub, consecration, doctrine, ecumenical, eschatology, heresy, impenitent, incarnate, inerrancy, justification, omnipotence, omnipresence, omniscience, rapture, redemption, Sabbath, and sanctified. Believe it or not, if you follow Jesus, all of those words and concepts are important for you to understand. They're important. But I believe they're best understood in simple terms. Now, I'm not going to go through all of those today because I want to focus on a word that's confusing to a lot of people, but it's one of the most simple words in the Bible, and the word is heaven. No, that's not complicated, Eric. You know, God's in heaven, and we might go to heaven, or we are going to, No. I think it's more complicated than you might think. It's not on God's side, the complicated, it's on ours. If you want to read a really good book, and it's quick read, you can do it in a few settings, maybe even one. It's a book by Randy Alcorn, who's a fabulous writer, and it's titled Heaven. You ought to be able to remember that one. He's a great writer, and in his book, he gives 9 simple facts about heaven. Now, I'm going to walk through 7 of those. I'm going to leave out 2. And the reason I'm going to leave out 2 is so you'll think, I need to go get that book. Now, we don't get any royalties on the book at all. But well, one of the 9 I just disagree with totally, so I won't be going over that one. But the 7 I think are very important. So, here we go. He says, rule number 1, we will not miss our earthly lives in heaven. There is nothing about this place that you're going to miss when you get to heaven. You might be in a place where you say 98% of my current life is bad. It is just not fun. Some of you would say 100% of my life is bad. And if you're in that place today, please come talk to me after the service. Because I'll show you, it's not 100% bad. It never is 100% bad. There's always things that we can look at as good. Sometimes you just kind of get in that funk and you don't know what to do. Sometimes you need somebody else to tell you that all your life isn't bad. Some things we call bad are not bad at all. What does that mean? Well, some things we call bad are opportunities for us to grow or to get stronger. Some things we call bad are really good because they're blessings in disguise. They're future blessings. Some things are, in fact, just bad, but not everything. Now, you might be that rare person who says, well, 98% of my life is good. Well, that's a good thing. That means you're an optimist. You have a great attitude about life. Maybe you're somewhere in the middle, but whether you think, well, this much of my life is bad or this much of my life is good, Alcorn says you will not miss anything in this life if you go to heaven. Here's what some people will tell you about heaven. It's a better place. That's absolutely ridiculous. Oh, it's not a better place. No, it's not a better place. It's a place that's beyond our understanding. We can't even fathom how great a place heaven is. I love the story Michael Jr. tells. He's a comedian. You ought to YouTube him. Christian comedian, by the way. He said that when he was 7 years old, he went to his first funeral with his grandmother. And he didn't understand what's going on. All he knew was there's a guy up front in a box. And he said it was a really nice box. But he didn't know. And he said, Grandma, what's the man doing in the box? And she said, he in a better place. And he said, well, Grandma, what kind of box did he live in before? I mean, no, it's not a better place. That's ridiculous. It's hard to fathom. It's hard to even imagine how good it will be. But you will not miss anything about earth in heaven. The second thing, Some of you, this may come as a bit of a shock to some of you, but if you go to heaven, you're not going to become an angel. For some of you, that's not even a question. And for those of you who think you will become an angel, you are sadly mistaken. You need to get some reality therapy. You will not become an angel in heaven. I don't care what that Christmas story says when the bell rings. You are not going to get wings in heaven. It's not going to happen. Angels stay angels, and we stay us. Now, we're going to change. We're going to be different. But we're not going to be angels. Look with me to 2 Corinthians 5. This is one of my favorite passages about the next life. Starting in verse 1, Paul says, "For we know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down." I love that imagery because we spend so much money in death, when all we're doing is putting a tent in the ground. That's weird, isn't it? I'm not being derogatory, but that's all we're doing. This is a tent. He says, "We know that when this earthly tent we live in is taken down, that is when we die and leave this earthly body, we'll have a house in heaven, an eternal body made for us by God Himself and not by human hands. We grow weary in our present bodies, and we long to put on our heavenly bodies like new clothing." Let me tell you something that maybe you don't know. And if you don't know this, you're probably in your teens or 20s. As we grow older, things change. One of the great reasons I like to see young people live to be old people is they know what it's like now. I used to not. Our bodies change. And here's what now, I don't know if this is true for everybody, probably is, but almost everybody, at least people I talk to, everybody seems to have an issue with the way they look. Something they don't like. So let me ask you a question. And I'm going to ask you to throw out a number. We'll just all do it at once. Satchel Paige was a great baseball player in the past. And he asked a question once. He said, "How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were?" That's neat. How old would you be if you didn't know how old you were? When did you think you looked your best? Everybody, get the number in your head on the count of 3. 1, 2, 3. Oh, you bunch of weenies. I mean, I couldn't hear half of you. Let's do it again. 1, 2, 3. All right. I heard 41. And that's, did anybody but me say 34? For me, I don't know why, but when I think of myself, I think 34, but then I look in the mirror and reality sets in. I don't look 34. I look 37, but I don't look 34. You see, in heaven, you're going to have a body in heaven. You're not going to be some spirit that's floating around on clouds. You're going to have a body. But it's not going to look like the body you have right now. So if you have body issues or so, if you have those kind of things and you think, I got a little bit here, got a little bit, waddling there, waddling. That is not going to exist in heaven. And for some of you, that's a big enough reason to go, right? I mean, man, I'm going to be looking good in heaven. I mean, that's a plus. So in heaven, we're going to have bodies. They're just not going to look like our bodies here. We will not have to look in the mirror and wish we were different. That's another thing heaven's going to be like. Number 3, we won't be tempted to sin. Not bad. Because sin doesn't exist in heaven. It's not there. You see, God and sin cannot occupy the same space physically. That's why God and sin can't be in the same heart at the same time. And confession is necessary from us, for those who want to get close to Christ. But sin and God, they don't occupy the same space. Heaven is full of God, so it can't have any sin. There will be nothing in heaven to tempt you to do wrong. There'll be nothing in heaven to tempt you to turn away from God. Nothing in heaven to tempt you to disobey. That's pretty good. Number 4, we will have some work to do when we get there. Oh man, oh no. No, it's not like you're thinking at all. You see, God is a working God. God's not just floating around up there, making us do all the work down here. God is a working God even in heaven. And when you hear the word work, it might not be the kind of word you want to link to heaven. Because you might be thinking, my work here isn't easy. Or I wish I didn't have to work here, or the work I used to do, it just wasn't a lot of fun. And that's true. You can thank the first man for that. You can thank Adam in the Garden of Eden because he messed up work for us all. In the garden, God creates Adam. And he said, Adam, I want you to go to work. I want you to go to work taking care of Eden. And it wasn't hard. There was a lot to do. But it wasn't hard because Adam didn't understand the word hard. Adam was having a great time in the garden. Every day he got up, it was like the first day on the job. But see, having fun at work, that wasn't good enough for Adam. Adam wanted more. So he disobeyed God, did what God told him not to do, and everything about your work changed that day. In Genesis chapter 3, verse 17, God's doling out the truth now for Adam and Eve and Satan in chapter 3 of Genesis. And in 17, it says, and to the man, God said, since you listened to your wife, we won't deal with that today. You chuckle, but it's in there. I can also show you where Adam had the opportunity to do some really neat things with his wife, and he blew it first, actually. Okay, since you listened to your wife, and you ate from the tree whose fruit I commanded you not to eat, the ground is cursed because of you. Here it comes. All your life you will struggle to scratch a living from the ground, from your work. That's why our work's hard today. That's why it's not fun all the time today. But there will be work in heaven. Not going to be floating on a cloud. You're not going to have those wings. I don't know what kind of work it's going to be, but since heaven's a perfect place, I think you're going to be perfectly content with whatever God is having you do. Number 5, we will experience emotions in heaven. But they're all good ones. There are no bad emotions anymore. See, we're going to be overwhelmed with God's love. It's going to be overwhelmed, and that will bring emotion out in us. We're going to be really happy with whatever God has for us. The Bible talks about great banquets and feasts. You're going to get to eat a lot in heaven. And remember, your body's not going to be something that you're ashamed of. Now, I don't know how all that's going to work, but that's going to be fun. There's going to be all of this kind of stuff in heaven. And you might say, but Eric, what about the flip side? We've been saying through this series, everything has a flip side. This is the good news. In heaven, it doesn't. There is no side B. There is no heads and tails in heaven. On the earth, everything has a flip side. There's a time to laugh, there's a time to cry, there's a time to be born, there's a time to die. Scriptures are very clear on that. In heaven, none of that takes place. Revelation 21. It says in verse 4 that God will wipe every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death, no more sorrow, no more crying, no more pain. All of these things are gone forever. You cannot go to heaven and experience pain. You cannot go to heaven and cry. That's why and you've heard me say before, when people say, oh, I know my daddy's looking down on me right now and he's smiling. Well, that's when you've had a really good day. Well, what about when you're having a bad day? Well, then you'd have to say, well, daddy's looking down on me and calling me a bonehead. No, people aren't looking down from heaven on you. I wish you'd stop saying it. Because there's no crying in heaven. And I'm telling you, I've got a dad in heaven. And if he saw some of the things I thought and did, he'd be crying every day. It's not going to happen because there are no tears. There is no death. There is no sorrow anymore. Nobody's sorry anymore. All the negative and nasty and painful side of life is going to be gone. Never coming back. Number 6, we will recognize each other in heaven. 1 Thessalonians 4, Paul says, "For the Lord himself will come down from heaven with a commanding shout." That's when Jesus comes back for the second time. "With a voice of the archangel, with the trumpet call of God. First, the Christians who have died will rise from their graves. Then, here it comes, together with them, we who are still alive and remain on the earth will be caught up in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. Then we will be with the Lord forever." It stands to reason, if we're all going to be together, we're not going to be strangers. I mean, we're going to know each other better than we've ever known. Can you imagine? You're never going to have to. You're never going to have to walk down the aisle. You know how it is when you walk down the aisle at a grocery store or another store, and I know I go to church with them and I've seen them around, but I can't remember their name. Or is that just me? That's why everybody on the planet to me is, "Hey, man." And you're laughing because I've done that to you, women included. "Hey, man." I mean, it just comes out. Not a gender thing, just pops out there. Sometimes I don't remember my own name. But can you imagine? You're never going to forget another name. You're going to know everybody in heaven. You're going to be able to call them by name, whatever God has given them. And you're going to recognize them. Now, I don't know who you're looking forward to seeing. And when you ask people that, we always try to be holy and say, "Well, I'm looking forward to seeing Jesus and of course the Apostle Paul, and I'm looking forward to see Moses." I'll be honest with you, I'm looking forward to seeing Andy Griffith and Doc Watson. I am. I mean, when my dad went to heaven and when Jackie's dad went to heaven, those are the two names in my family that come up all the time. I want to see Andy Griffith, I want to see Doc Watson. If you don't know those people, you are not an American. We need to check your card. We're going to know everybody in heaven. Number 7, you are not going to be bored in heaven. Alcorn says sometimes he hears people say, "I'd rather be having a good time in hell than to be bored in heaven." And he says what they're doing is assuming that having a right relationship with God is boring. That sin is more fun. And he says apparently the people that say this, they've never talked to a person who was lost and dying in sin and brought back to life and health through a relationship with Jesus. Because people who've been living that really bad life and they've been transformed by Christ, they will tell you the new life is not boring at all. It feels good. It feels good. And there's a side benefit. You never wake up the next morning and wonder what you did last night. You were afraid to laugh at that, weren't you? Hypocrites! In heaven, you're not going to have to make amends with people that you've done things to, because all that's taken care of. Boy, that's not going to be a scary, boring time, isn't it? You are never going to have to apologize again for doing wrong things. Because all that's been forgiven. All of it. If you know how good it feels to be clean on the inside now, you ain't seen nothing yet. Alcorn says, if you believe hell's going to be more fun than heaven, then you've fallen for the lie of the devil, because the devil convinces people that sin makes life interesting. And he says, and once we're hooked in that sin, we finally can see the truth. We see the truth. Sin doesn't make life full. Sin makes life empty. And in heaven, life is full. He says, boredom is impossible. In Psalm 16, the Bible says, no wonder my heart is glad and I rejoice. My body rests in safety, for you will not leave my soul among the dead. You will not allow your Holy One to rot in a grave. That's a picture of Jesus coming out of the ground. You will show me the way of life. You will grant me the joy of your presence. This is the one I want you to focus on. And the pleasures of living with you forever, living in heaven, is an absolute pleasure. If you believe in Jesus today and you're trying to do anything to get to heaven except believing in Jesus, I'm telling you, you can stop. Stop trying to do stuff to get into heaven. Well, maybe stop trying to be good to get into heaven. It doesn't work. That should have set somebody free today. And then religious people will say, well, Eric, that's a really dangerous message and you have to be careful. But because then people will stop doing good. I have never in my life met a person who says, I follow Jesus, and they're growing in the Scriptures, pull a stunt like that. I have never met the first person. An authentic, growing, maturing Christian will do good because he or she understands the one who saved them did good, and before he left this planet, he told them to do good. That's why we do good. Look, we do good not to get into heaven, doesn't work, but because Jesus told us to do good. So stop trying to get in by doing something. And if doing something won't get you into heaven, what will? What's the password? Is there an exam? Is there going to be a drug test? Go in a cup. And now you're wanting to know when was the last time I had to take one, right? Do you need a high school education? Maybe college? Maybe a PhD? Do you have to be baptized? You have to be a member of a church? You have to pray so much? Do you have to give so much money? How do you get in? Now, some of you already, you're thinking, well, I know how to get in, and I've already done that, and all this is old news, and it might be. But here's what I'm believing. I'm believing everybody here, everybody that's listening on live stream, and every human being that may be listening to this message at any future time, I believe you know someone, and you're suspicious that they're not in because they've never done the right things to get in. I believe everybody knows somebody. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to give you 3 things. And if you're thinking, I don't know how to approach people, I don't know how to do evangelism, I'm just real quiet, I don't know what to say, you take these 3 things, and I'm going to bring them up on the screen, get you a shot, write them down. And when you find that person, it might be a brother, it might be a mother, a father, it might be a cousin, it might be a coworker, and you know that they don't know. All I would say is to take these 3 things and hand them to them and say, would you read this? That may be the best evangelism tool you ever have to bring somebody to Christ. Just ask them to read things. Number 1, Ephesians chapter 2, verses 8 and 9. God saved you by His grace when you believed. You can't take credit for it. It's a gift from God. Salvation is not a reward for the good things we've done. So none of us can boast about it. Just hand it to someone and say, would you read that for me? You don't have to say anything else. Number 2, John chapter 14, verse 6. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. You don't have to argue that with anybody. Just say, will you read it? Just will you read it? Romans chapter 10, verse 9. If you confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Would you read it? You don't have to tell them about sin. You don't have to tell them they're going to hell if they don't do the right things. You don't have to tell them to join a church or to give their money. You don't have to tell them to start praying. They'll figure all of that out once Christ becomes real to them. Just hand them these 3 passages and say, would you read that for me? And you may never have to say another thing. Now, you might be panicking a little bit. You say, well, I didn't get those down. Well, after the last song, we're just going to post the scriptures back up on the screen for you that you might write them down. But you might be 3 sentences away from seeing somebody you really love a lot spend forever with you in heaven. And that person making those decisions about these 3 sentences, that person might be you. And if you don't know him and you're not heavenward bound, I hope that you'll do something with these 3 today. How about it? Are we good? Everybody good? Everybody good? All right. Father, I thank you that you didn't make any of this complicated. And that's why I think it confounds some people that it's not complicated enough. But you said you have hidden things from the wise. It means they can't see because they don't want to see. They want to complicate life. You said you've given it to the simple. So my prayer today is that in this particular place, not in our Bible studies, not in our Christian maturity, not in our growth, but in receiving Jesus, that we would become absolute simpletons and foolish. And that we would believe on your word alone, not the words of a preacher or a teacher or a pastor or a priest, but on your word alone would we believe. Father, I'm excited already for anyone who takes the 3 scriptures that we gave today and just hands them to an unbeliever and says, would you read these 3 things? And we're going to trust you to do the rest because we know that you will. Lord, thank you for those who are going to be giving an offering. Thank you for those who have sown sparingly and they've reaped sparingly and they want some generosity and they're going to start sowing generously. Thank you for that. Thank you for all the people who are hearing this message and especially those who might respond to your word, not mine. Amen.